I realised it's not really a conversation that how good Dan Hooker's chin is. I think
No,
everyone knows, but he's never really in those conversations for some reason
no.
because he really should be. Because that head kick, I do not understand it. Inhuman. It's like sure it rattled him a bit, but he recovered remarkably quick. That would put the lights
Instantly.
out of almost anybody. I'm unbelievable, yeah. And Jalen looked really strong as he does. You know that he had that extra bit of length that I think that really helped him there in the first few minutes. He was popping, his shots were just landing harder. Hooker couldn't really land anything clean on him, and obviously there was that game plan switch in the second where Dan the commentator said it, just turned it into a bit of a dogfight,
Mm-hmm.
took it to him,
Yep.
didn't just completely disregarded Jalen's power and his danger, and just went forward,
Yep.
and that clearly paid dividends for him. As we saw, he so nearly got that finish. We saw Jalen's face when that rear naked choke was
Oh
sunk in. That
wow.
was
Forgot about that. That
seconds
was
away,
incredible.
man. I know, and it is an interesting topic because obviously Dan got the decision, but I think a lot of this actually of the decisions just in general, not just obviously to last night, but it's a bit of a question about the rule set in MMA. Do you know what I mean? It's always a bit unclear and a bit grey because you're judging over 15 minutes, not the last minute of a round. And you talk about damage. How do you score that round? It's a strange one because obviously I'd rather Jalin would have won one for my predictions and two because of my bet. And I wasn't mad that Dan got the decision, but I did notice there was a lot of discourse online about how that round should have been scored purely for the fact that Jalin was winning the majority of that second one quite convincingly until the last 30 odd seconds or so.
It's
It's
just
an interesting one.
yeah, it's one of those ones. It's just it's a grey area, and
I don't like that.
yeah, it's just a grey area, and
It shouldn't be a grey area.
and
There should be a
it's
way
like
of
that
deciding that.
it's like that so consistently. But coming into the matchup, I was perplexed why every time I went online, people said Dan Hooker's washed, and I just could only
No,
think
never.
that you're not paying attention if you think that. And sometimes this is just the honest truth. Fans add no nuance to losses. They'll just put it down to either making excuses or they won't even know the nuance to add it to context. Because when you look at Dan Hooker, you look at who he's lost to the best of the best. But then he's done it on stupid things. He's fighting the likes of Arnold Allen on an 8-fight win streak, pound for pound, one of the best featherweights in the world. He's fighting Islam Makhachev, pound for pound, one of the best in the world, on a week's notice, quarantined in a Vegas hotel, doing it for a big payday because no one else would possibly take that fight. And people are thinking he's washed because he's losing these fights. He has a camp, and then he's given someone like a surgeon, Claudio Puelles, who's apparently going to knee bar him because he's on a 5-fight win streak. He embarrasses him and makes him quit, and actually gives us one of the most questionable performances of recent times at Claudio Puelles against Dan Hooker, where he made him literally quit and just lay on the floor and give up from body shots. So we have to put some respect on his name.
We do.
Then coming into it, I said if there's any person Dan Hooker would actually want to face, it's probably someone like Jalin Turner, because he's been getting those looks so consistently for so long with the likes of Israel Adesanya, like the likes of Carlos Ulberg and Black Diamond, all these people with a similar sort of frame and style to Jalin Turner, where you've got that longer, rangier kickboxer. And as you said, when it was pretty and it was on the outside, it was always going to be Dan Hooker. But I think he needed a little bit of time to, number one, get those reads, make those adjustments, but also just warm into the fight.
Jalin, you mean?
Yeah, Dan, I mean, sorry.
Oh, you mean Dan? Or...
Yeah, no, I mean Dan. He needed a little time to...
Yes,
I think Dan Hooker's so used to being in these sort of 5-round fights and these longer fights and sometimes just getting into it a little bit. The first round was a little bit tentative. There wasn't a lot of output. There was quite a lot of respect from both. He wasn't really getting his hands dirty. And then I think, as you said, as it warmed up, he worked his way into range. He made it a bit dirtier. He got into that dogfight. And then as soon as it looked a bit uglier, it was always going to be the clinch work and that just dog in Dan Hooker that was going to prevail. But when he ate that head kick, I said we have to, on one shot alone, put him in the pound for pound chin list because
yeah, he's up there.
That was,
Absolutely.
for me personally, you can all have your own opinion to this. For me personally, as a fan, that was the biggest single shot I've ever seen absorb live and just eaten and recovered. For me personally, it was insane.
I mean, the fact that he didn't even, let alone he didn't even get knocked down. It's just unbelievable. Like, let alone get like put out cold. He didn't even get knocked down, and that is just completely flush. It was unbelievable, and I think as impressive as it was, I think it does show, it does highlight maybe a bit of a weakness of Dan's game. As impressive as the win was, I'm not really surprised that your prediction was right. Even though obviously I went the other way, I think there is definitely something to improve there to tighten up his defense a little bit. He did get caught quite a lot actually, especially in the first, in the
Head
first round and
movement,
a lot
right?
of the second. Yeah, not enough of it.
Yeah.
Keeping his hands maybe a little bit up more, parrying away some shots. Perhaps he was sort of willing to trade and take, which is, we've talked about this before. It's okay for an extent. You can rely on your chin for a while. Same problem with Shavkat. I think is
Oh,
you
for
can't
sure.
keep relying on your chin
For
forever
sure.
because
That's a good
eventually
comparison.
you're gonna get put out, and that's just what's gonna happen. So I'd like to see that. I think that could, if tightening up that defense a little bit, I think he could really level up there. And
When
it's a huge win for him. Absolutely.
when you have a look at, and you know what made me laugh just quickly? I saw things online along the lines of, Jalin Turner fraud check. And I just laughed
No,
because, no,
no,
I
but
laughed so heavily because I thought, not only is Jalin Turner a UFC veteran, by the way, he's literally
yeah,
been in the promotion for so long. He's fought at welterweight as well. He's been around for a very long time, been at very good gyms, obviously worked with Perillo and Ruka and whatnot, got very good wins. Also just submitted Brad Riddell in 30 seconds, by the way, who's a
as
top
you do.
10 lightweight, which is no easy feat. So there is no fraud involved. But what I was going to say about Dan Hooker is he does have a very similar style to, in a lot of senses, to Israel Adesanya. You can see a lot of their striking similarities where the front hand is a little bit low and it's sort of that range finder and shows different level and it's almost an antenna. Their long range back kicks sort of stabs and teeps and front kicks and things like that. You see similarities, but the thing that Adesanya does very well that Dan doesn't do as well is pairs that with the head movement. Because if you're going to carry your hands lower or you're going to have those sort of frames and build those hand fights and whatnot, you need to have a lot of head movement that goes with that because you don't have the defense of your guard. And he has those low shots, which is nice for things like uppercuts and jabs from weird angles and obviously throws nice straight shots. But, and especially when he's in the clinch, he's got those like his short, powerful uppercuts and
Mm,
hooks. He's really, really good there, Dan Hooker. He's always fun to watch. You can't help but think of the Dustin Poirier fight when they're in the
what a fight!
apex and they're in the pocket and they're just throwing hooks and uppercuts
It's one of
and
my
knees
favorites.
and it's some of the most devastating MMA fighting you're ever likely going to see.
I do want to say, speaking of uppercuts, you're gonna